Hello all, welcome to my YouTube video. Come on, girl. Go. Throughout this video, you'll be watching me working on my off-grid building I plan to make into a home. While you watch, I'd like to tell another few stories about the North and South Peace area. While Fort McLeod can claim the distinction of being the first trading post established west of the Rockies and the oldest continuously operated post in British Columbia, nevertheless, Rocky Mountain Fort, the subject of this article, later known as Fort St. John, preceded it by some 7 or 8 years, a derelict fort in northern British Columbia. In the Canadian archives among the Mason papers, there is a journal, the Rocky Mountain Fort Journal, Fall 1799, covering a period from 5th October 1799 to 20th April 1800. It is endorsed probably by Mason, sans aucune importance, without any importance. But time and events have given the due importance of its being the only written record we have of the proceedings at the first trading post established in what is now British Columbia. The location of this fort, the forerunner of the present Fort St. John, has been established by the late J.N. Wallace, DLS, as being on the bank of the Peace, some 5 or 6 miles above or west of the present town site of Fort St. John, and 45 miles below Rocky Mountain Portage, the present Hudson's Hope. So I'm gonna go up to the house now, and I'm gonna get about 8-foot boards. I'm gonna cut my 16-footers at 8 feet. And maybe I can get this done by myself. I don't know. But, yeah, we'll see what happens. Grandma and Grandpa helped me a lot trying to get this whole thing up. And then I ran out of staples. Right there. Alexander Mackenzie first selected a site at the mouth of the South Pine River, or Sinew, Moberly River, as it was then called, on his voyage up the Peace in 1793, but there is no record of the fort being constructed until its mention in the journal. Statements in this journal show that the winter of 1799 and 1800 was not the first winter of the post, so that it must have been built earlier. In 1797, John Finley made an exploratory trip to the headwaters of the Peace River, and it seems probable that this fort was built during or in consequence of this journey. This would date it as being built 8 years before Rocky Mountain Portage or Fort McLeod, both of which were built in 1805. With the crazy little load. Now to unload it. And I'm going to cut them in half at 8 foot. It's my little cutting station. And maybe start putting some board and batten up. So just to be clear, I am no carpenter. I am a welder. This is my first big carpentry job, and all I know is get your straight edges. So here we go on the board that I'm gonna rest all my board and batten boards on. So here we go. Wallace, in fixing the location of this fort, actually followed the courses both of Mackenzie and David Thompson. Thompson's last course reads, north 82 west, 2 miles to the house, thank God, and has latitude confirms the site exactly, for he records it as 56 degrees, 12 minutes and 12 seconds. Rough cut 2x4 for putting my boards on. I'm gonna level this out, and then I can put my 8-foot boards. These are my 1x8s for my board and batten, and then I can put these on there. And I'm almost touching that, but I have plans to put cedar shakes up there. So that's what I'm gonna do. It's just starting to rain here, but I'm gonna go until it's real bad, but let's hope it's okay. But we also need the rain, so. The journal mentions 3 men being sent to the west end of the portage, a trip which took them 6 days. Since the portage itself is only 12 miles, this would confirm the fact that the fort was some 45 miles below or downstream from the Rocky Mountain portage, the fort which Simon Fraser built in 1805. There are 2 references in the journal to men being sent down to the lower fort, or to MRF Finley Fort. This would be Mackenzie's fort at the Forks, now marked by a cairn. A few miles above the present town of Peace River, this journey took them 19 days, which would be a reasonable time for the distance. There is no certain proof as to who built the fort or who kept the journal, but Mr. Wallace in his book, The Wintering Partners on Peace River, favors Finley as the builder and Fraser as the writer of the journal. The post was apparently closed in 1805, but the need for a fort in that locality was soon proved, and Fort St. John was established a few miles downstream and has been in existence except for a short period ever since. Fort St. John can therefore claim the distinction of being, in a sense, the oldest white settlement in British Columbia by some 8 years. Fort St. John has seen many vicissitudes. It has been moved at least 5 times from one side of the river to another. This frequent moving of a fort, as in the case of Fort St. John, was no uncommon thing in the Peace. The Hudson's Bay Fort, St. Mary's on the Peace near the Smoky, occupied 3 sites in 4 years. The moving was due to a variety of causes: a better site for the Indian visitors, lack of wood for fuel, and, according to one historian, the difficulty of getting rid of the vermin with which the log buildings became infested. Had DDT then been available, the early traders would have been saved a lot of discomfort. In 1823, it was the scene of one of the rare Indian massacres, when 5 employees of the Hudson's Bay Company were killed by the local Indians. One version of the story is told by John McLean in his book, Notes of 25 Years' Service in Hudson's Bay Territory, published in 1849. So this is day 2 on the putting up my boards, my 1x8s. So I brought a bunch down, and I'm going to cut them up and see if I can put some more up today. I have 10 here waiting for me that I've already got prepped and ready from yesterday, so that'll be good. The new paperweight. Come on, girls. Rose. So yesterday when Grandma and Grandpa were over and they helped me put all that paper up, me and Grandma went around and cut some tin, covered some of the holes from squirrels or whatever. And so now I don't got to worry as bad about mice problems. So that'll be nice. He visited the scene in 1833 when the fort was still a desolate ruin, and he tells the story as it was told to him by Mr. McIntosh, who was then in charge of the district. The post was to be closed and the business transferred to Rocky Mountain Portage, later known as Hudson's Hope. the trading place of the Tuscany Indians, who were great hunters. But the Tuscanies and Fort St. John Indians had a long-standing quarrel, and the chief regarded the move as an insult and advantage to his rivals. Guy Hughes, the clerk in charge of the post, had sent his 4 canoemen off with a load of trade goods to Rocky Mountain Portage, some 45 miles upstream. In their absence, he was walking alone on the river bank when 2 Indians shot him down. They carried his lifeless body into the building where McLean states his blood still marks the floor. When his 4 men returned unsuspecting to the fort, they were met by the volley from the Indians in ambush. That is the company's version, but local legend tells another story, a tale of a cache of rum hidden in the fort, and of drink-crazed Indians demanding more than the company's meager allowance. Another story attributes the fight to trouble over the Indian women, and this, judging by the other experiences in the North, may well be the true one. In any case, old-timers in the Fort St. John country still cherish hopes of finding that cache of rum mellowed by the years. The company organized an expedition to punish the guilty Indians, but just as it was setting out, wiser counsels prevailed, and instead they closed the posts at St. John and Dunvegan. These establishments were closed for some 5 years as a means of punishment. The closing of these posts is said to have caused great suffering among the Indians, many of whom starved to death, since by that time they were entirely dependent upon the posts for ammunition and supplies. Fort Dunvegan was reopened in 1828 and a new post built at Fort St. John. By 1873, the Hudson's Bay Company, which since its union with the Northwest Company had held undisputed sway in the North Country, was beginning to meet with opposition from the free traders. One of these at Fort St. John was Nigger Dan, D.T. Williams, a Negro trader and trapper of doubtful reputation and ferocious appearance. Colonel Butler tells the story in his book, The Wild Northland. Some 4 years before, Dan had squatted on the north bank of the Peace at St. John, opposite the Hudson's Bay Fort, and when the company decided to move across the river and build beside his cabin, he claimed squatters' rights to all the land around, and embarked upon a single-handed war with the gentlemen adventurers. From his lair across the river, he issued manifestos of a very violent nature. He planted stakes along the river bank, upon which he painted hieroglyphics of a menacing character. At night he would parade up and down the river bank, shouting curses and threats at his opponents, and varied this by reciting appropriate passages from the Old Testament. Finally, one day, the young clerk in charge of the Hudson's Bay Post received the following ultimatum. Kennedy, I hereby warn you that come and get your personal property, if any you have got of my premises, in 24 hours, then keep away from me, because I shall not be troubled nor trod on only by her most noble majesty, Queen Victoria. Signed, D.T. Williams. This might have had serious consequences, but for the fact that Colonel Butler, on his trip across the continent, arrived in the nick of time. Before leaving Fort Garry, he had been appointed a Justice of the Peace for Rupert's Land and the Northwest Territories, and both the Hudson's Bay Claimant and the Negro occupant appealed to him to support their property rights. As an officer in Her Majesty's Army, Colonel Butler was familiar with diplomatic procedures and official documents. He drew up a judicial memorandum solemnly warning the said parties to keep the peace. The last sentence of this imposing document reads as follows: Executed by me, as Justice of the Peace for Rupert's Land and Northwest Territories this 22nd day of April 1873. I'm going to put about right there. It's going to be my little kitchen corner, little window over the sink. But I'm going to rip out this board here, and that's what I'm going to frame up the window with. Support. This had the desired effect, for Andan had much on his conscience, having been suspected of more than one killing. A lengthy perusal of the word executed in the final sentence carried with it the ominous suggestion of strangulation at the end of a rope, a fate he had long feared. The first experiments in agriculture at Fort St. John were made at this time, for in 1872 a traveler comments that Andan's barley was ripe for cutting. Another colorful free trader at Fort St. John in those days was 12-Foot Davis. He had been a miner in the Caribou, where he had staked a 12-foot fractional placer claim. The original staker had acted on the belief that it was better to stake too much than too little, but the claim was reduced to lawful size following a survey. The oversight earned Davis his name of 12-Foot, and the sum of the $10,000 which he received on selling the fraction. With the prospect of the Hart Highway into the Peace River being completed in 1952, and the discovery of oil in the vicinity of Fort St. John, it is important that an effort be made in the new future to relocate the site of this, the first fort to be built in British Columbia. Owing to the nature of the terrain and the fact that development has been principally on the north side of the river, it is quite possible that the original site has been undisturbed. Lending credence to this belief is a story told by Mr. Frank Gulata of Dawson Creek, a well-known big game guide. Many years ago, while on his trapline, Mr. Gulata found the ruins of what unmistakably had been a trading post, as evidenced by a circular arrangement of rocks, fireplaces, and the remains of chimneys. Large trees were growing from the hole which had been the cellar. The Northland is being opened up, and it would be a fitting task for the Historic Sites and Monument Board to undertake the finding and preservation of this old site before the place has been disappeared entirely and the trace of Rocky Mountain Fort is gone. The rich mineral wealth of the area has replaced the furs in order of economic importance. The world itself has replaced organic raw materials like furs with products made in other countries out of petroleum products. Man's materials that does not have the same abilities and class and wear as the original product that God created. So I just ripped up my 2x4 that I got off of that wall there that I ripped off, and got them to the exact length so they would fit in my doorway here, or my window. And so I'm not sure if I should put this up there, like toenail that and then put it up, or if I should build like the 3 pieces to hold it in place and then put it all up as one. Never done this before, so not exactly sure what to do, but I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna probably go over to the Hutterites and check out some tin for hopefully next week for my roof. So yeah. So I don't know what I'm doing here, but I got these two boards and I marked exactly where I'm gonna want this little guy to go. So he can go about there. Oh, and then I'm gonna put this on the top. So we're gonna fit that together. It's all set up. Gonna be checking if it's square or not, and then I'm gonna put my nails in and then put this whole thing up there. It is for us to hope that progress will not entirely destroy this tangible link with the romantic past, with its vision of explorers, voyagers, traders, and trappers, and adventurers, who were the virile vanguard, pushing ever forward into the unknown. To such posterity owes the debt of remembrance. Let us preserve the fireplaces and chimneys of old Rocky Mountain Fort, where after toil and hazards of river portage and trail, they rested a while before passing into the fabric of history. You can find this article and many more history stories of the North and South Peace at South Peace Historical Society online. So there we go, my window. I'll have to do a little bit of more work on that, but I'm gonna go check out my tins. Thanks. Got it framed in, so that's good. Rose is enjoying the view. So beautiful. Thank you for watching our video.